Hey everybody, Deathblade here with another Yin Yang China, where I'm talking about the positive and negative aspects of living in China from the perspective of an outsider, a foreigner. In the exact instant that I started recording this video, the battery light started flashing on my camera, so like all of a sudden I'm very nervous that the battery is just going to cut out at any second, so I'm going to kind of try to go through this quickly. I'm going to be talking today about driving and the upsides and downsides of not as a driver in China, but just being a part of the experience of cars on the road, whether it's from the perspective of being in a cab, of being the passenger and somebody that you know driving, whether you're driving or whether you're a pedestrian on the road. I'm going to kind of lump all of these things in together with some observations. A quick qualification about what I think about driving. So I come from Southern California. I know people from California and especially Southern California kind of have a bad reputation in terms of driving when it comes to the rest of the United States. I know also that every country in the world has different rules and there are different kind of standards and different customs all over the world. I am aware of all that. I do have to point out that I have driven extensively in Southern California. You know, I actually had work that involved driving a lot, so maybe I drove a little bit more than the average person. And I've also driven a lot south of the border. San Diego's right next to Mexico, so I've been to Tijuana and I've been to a lot of places in Baja California. I've gone on road trips up and down Baja Peninsula. Well, okay, I shouldn't say the peninsula, but like, you know, to places in Baja. So I've experienced a lot of the driving in Mexico. I do have to say that the driving in Mexico kind of frightens me. It's like a little bit scary. Well, it was at first, and I kind of got used to it. And so I feel like compared to many Americans who are only, you know, in America and don't really travel and drive in other places very often, I feel like I might have a little bit richer experience. I don't know, it's hard to say. I feel like the driving in Mexico is a lot more sort of crazy and scary than the driving in China. Actually, one of the things that I found in China is that drivers tend to drive a lot more slowly, especially when it's in the city. Like when you're talking about out on the highway, obviously people are going fast or whatever, but most of the time in the city, it's like kind of like maddeningly slow and like methodical. I mean, really frustrating. Like as a pedestrian, you'll be walking along and there'll be a car coming and you're thinking, okay, well, I should probably like I'll just wait for the car to pass. And then the car will kind of like, and then kind of slowly come in front of you and then kind of stop. And then you're like, okay, I guess I'll go. And then they'll, and then oh, better stop. And you're like, what are you doing, driver? And then the driver's like looking around and like, okay, I'll go. And then, like this situation has happened to me so many times, I can't even describe it. And it's really frustrating. I kind of just want to be like, either go or don't go. It's one or the other. Pick it. Stop or go. Very simple. None of this like, but it happens all the time. Another thing that the drivers in China tend to do is they're very sort of like focused on what's happening right in front of them. And you might think this is like stereotyping or something. I guarantee you it is not. After living here for 8 years and seeing this kind of situation come up over and over again in multiple situations, I can tell you it's not, you know, a thing where it happened once and then I think it happens all the time. I've seen it over and over and over again where the drivers, they're focused so much on what's happening right in front of them or right around them that they don't really pay too much attention to what's going on up ahead in the road. And then they end up getting in massive traffic jams. I've seen it over and over and over, whether it's big roads, whether it's small roads. Instead of, for example, holding back to let another car pass, then you can go, both cars will vroom, and then they're stuck and then they can't go. And then one of them has to kind of like slowly back up, but then there's a car behind them. So what do? The other guy starts to back up. Oh, there's a car behind them. Then they have to have those cars back up. I've seen it too many times to count. Now, one of the problems about the driving in China stems from a trend that sort of stopped just in the past couple years. Up to only a few years ago, for many years, essentially you could buy a driver's license. What I mean is people that had enough money could spend money to bypass certain requirements and tests, and essentially you could just buy a driver's license. And I know this might sound crazy to people in the United States, but it's absolutely true. There are a lot of drivers on the road in China who have pretty much no qualification to be able to drive other than the fact that they have, you know, eyes and hands and feet. And that's pretty much what qualifies them to drive. No experience, no training, They can just drive. And so because of that, I kind of have made a joke over the years many times to mostly cab drivers that they always find funny. For any of you who are listening that can speak Chinese, what I would always say is, I would say, 在中国没有交通规则，只有交通建议. So and so in English, what that means is, in China there are no traffic rules or laws. There are only traffic suggestions. And I would always get a good reaction from the cab drivers. Like, it's not like they would laugh uproariously, but they would always kind of chuckle and agree. I never had a single cab driver ever disagree with me or get in an argument with me about it. And I've made that joke like way too many times. Like, I need to retire that joke for sure. But almost everybody agrees. There are, if you try to take the driver test in China, which foreigners can do, by the way, there are a billion rules and virtually none of them are followed. Now, of course, I'm kind of being a little facetious and exaggerating. If there are traffic police in the area, of course people will like follow the rules and you can get tickets for breaking the rules. But the thing is, there are no traffic police like that the way that you think of it in at least in America, where like there are police cars or motorcycles and they'll pull you over if you break the rules. No. Mostly the traffic police direct traffic in city center area around the intersections. And if you break a law there, then you'll get a ticket. Also, you can get a ticket from getting caught doing something on cameras. There are a lot of cameras. But it's not like there are police cars out there checking to make sure that people aren't speeding, checking to make sure that people are using their signal, checking to make sure that people are turning when they're supposed to or not, changing lanes, all those things. Nobody's paying attention to any of that. So for the most part, all Chinese driving is just kind of, everybody's sort of like driving along, like watching out, trying to make sure they don't hit anybody. And then everybody just sort of goes with the flow, and then, you know, it is what it is. So it can be very frustrating, it can be very annoying. Let me get to the good side. So actually there are several good sides, I think. One of the good sides is that, and I've made this point to a lot of people, both foreigners and Chinese, over many years I've talked about this subject, and I've never had anybody provide me with any other good theory or like counterpoint to this, to what I'm about to say. So basically what I think is that in China, because of that sort of lack of rules, I think that everybody is actually a lot more cautious in their driving. People, for the most part, are always paying attention to everything around them because they assume that at any point somebody could come in front of them, like cut them off, you know, try to like veer this way or that way. It's just kind of assumed that that's going to happen. And so because of that, I actually do feel that despite the lack of training and experience, most drivers tend to be a lot more cautious. In fact, that caution is one of the reasons why, as I described earlier, people go so slow in like a really annoying fashion. The thing about America is that there's a presumption that everybody A, knows the rules, and B, is going to mostly follow the rules, generally speaking. So because of that, for example, if you're driving in America, you can, for the most part, you know, be fairly certain that somebody's not going to just randomly go in front of you to cut you off or something. Now, obviously, I know people cut people off and blah, blah, blah. That does happen. But there's kind of a presumption that good drivers are going to use their turn signal and they're going to change lanes in the proper fashion. You know, you can get in trouble if you don't, and most people do it. And so because of that, you know, when unexpected things do happen, I feel like it's more likely that there's going to be some accident, especially because of how quickly or how fast people drive in America. Because there's that sort of presumption that everybody's like kind of following the rules and knows what they're doing, you feel a lot more comfortable going way faster, way more quickly, changing lanes and things as you would expect people to do if everyone was following the rules. In China, because nobody is following the rules, then everybody kind of expects that to happen, and it's a lot more safe. And another thing I have to point out is because of that trend, I feel like there are a lot less accidents in China. Now, look, I've seen a lot of reports and I've seen people tweeting this and that, and I've seen news things about whatever horrific accidents. And then, of course, there's always horrific accidents no matter where you go. But what I can say from my personal experience, and again, you know, this is my experience, and I know my experience doesn't map to all of China and all of situations, but what I can say is that I have seen way more bad accidents in the United States, like way more than I've ever seen in China. In fact, I don't think I've ever seen a serious accident in China living here for 8 years. I've seen a lot of fender benders, And it's actually very frustrating because the slightest fender bender, I'm talking like a bump this big, both parties will stop their cars in the middle of the lane. They don't pull off to the side, they just stop in the middle of the lane, they get out and they wait for the police to come to resolve the issue for even the slightest thing. But that's all I've ever seen. I've never seen, glass shattered. I've never seen, ambulances and stretchers, but I've seen that so many times in the United States. In fact, just last year, when I went back for the first time to visit for a few weeks, a couple times on the freeway, I saw, major accidents where lanes were shut down. You have to go around, and there's police and fire trucks and ambulances and stretchers and like scary stuff. I haven't seen that like ever in China. I know that there's bad accidents that happen, but I do feel that especially within the city center, the slow driving, the cautious driving tends to lead to a more like safe environment. So those are a few of my thoughts about driving and traffic in China. Like I said, things have changed in the past few years. The rules about getting driver's license have become much more strict. For example, at least in the city that I live, anybody who is applying to get a driver's license has to spend a certain amount of time directing traffic at major intersections in the city. So I think that's actually a pretty cool thing. If people who want to learn how to drive have to observe firsthand and attempt to control the people that are driving around and driving crazily, that definitely is a major learning experience that's going to affect their ability to drive later. So that's kind of a cool thing. And there are a lot of other changes that are happening in China that I think will probably make for a much better China in terms of the driving and in terms of the traffic as the years progress. So I hope this is an interesting insight into China for those of you who are unfamiliar with it. And for any of you who are thinking of moving to China, just be prepared to deal with all of these kind of frustrating situations. So that's it for this Yin Yang China. I'm curious about your thoughts. How does what I've described compare to the traffic and the driving and the pedestrian situation wherever you live, whether that's in America or some other place? What about actually being a driver? Have you experienced driving in China? What do you think about it? Please definitely leave your thoughts in the comment section below. I do have a Patreon. If you're interested in more content like this, go ahead and support me on Patreon. You can vote on the topics that I talk about, and I'm hoping to add some more rewards and stuff for those who are able to support me on Patreon. And one last time, I'm going to point out that my wife, Madame Deathblade, said I need to come up with a catchphrase or some way to say like the video's over. She wanted me to do blowing kisses and stuff. That's not going to happen, but I'm definitely open to suggestions. So please let me know what you think I should say to sign off. Should I like clasp hands or something like that? Because that's a big thing in the novels that I translate. I don't know. I'm open to a lot of suggestions. I'll see you in the next video.